and this is in regards to the school surcharge facility. And just to guide the conversation a bit, I think this really goes, Director Francis, this is really going to be a discussion about the bedroom game that people may play, and how to give you a easy or clear, a very clear way to know how to enforce this and implement it. So I don't know if there's council members who want to start off with this, or if we'd rather go to Director Francis. I think that's where most of the issue we left off on was, but if there's others who have other things, please be sure to surface those.
I would agree with that, Vice Chair Rigby. Director Francis has taken the podium seat, and I think the issue that we found ourselves mid-vote at the public or at the legislative session was that we had two kind of competing theories about how to limit this. One was based on bedrooms, and another was based on square footage. And so, Director Francis, I'm assuming you're at least kind of familiar with where we got ourselves backed into a corner. And then maybe talk about the feasibility of your department enforcing one or both of those approaches, either square footage based or number of bedroom based.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I have no opinion on any of them. Well, actually, maybe a few opinions. Looking at the amendments, I have a couple of concerns with Amendment 1 and Amendment 1 to Amendment 1, both dealing with the bedrooms and the language talking about accessory apartments and/or two-family dwellings. It's looking through it and trying to, I'm not quite sure what you were trying to capture. And it seems to me it's more of a solution in search of a problem. If someone had a single-family dwelling and were making an additional second dwelling to it, maybe to make it like a duplex or something like that, that would never be considered as an addition. And so therefore, it's not going to, you don't need an exclusion for it in the definition, and definition of addition, because it's not ever going to be considered that way. And accessory apartments, although they could be additional square footage being added onto a house, let's say for an in-law suite or something like that, those aren't, most of our accessory apartments are interior alteration type work, like converting a basement, for example, so that it has its own entry and entrance and separated off as a separate dwelling unit within the basement. And again, if it's existing square footage in the house, that's not going to be something that's subject to the school surcharge anyway. I think the language, and again, I think your intent was talking about accessory apartments as somebody who's putting an additional unit onto a property to rent it out and make it like an additional revenue source, as opposed to an in-law suite or something of that nature. And again, most folks who are putting the in-law suites on, it's just going to be considered an addition, and it would be covered by the language in Amendment 2, where we simply exclude the square footage off of the up to 2,000 square feet is a certain fee, and over that's the higher fee. The other concerns I have with the Amendment 1 and the addition to Amendment 1 is it's going to encourage people, I won't say lie, but it's going to encourage people to bend the truth. I have a room that has a bed in it, has a closet and a bathroom associated with it. I sleep there, but I also read there. So maybe it's a reading room. And it's going to encourage people to sort of bend that sort of language so that they're going to call it a reading room or a sitting room or something of that nature. And there's actually a safety concern as part of that, because every house has to have a primary means of egress, down the stairs, out the door, out the front. But every sleeping area is also required to have a secondary means of escape, a rescue window for firefighters to be able to get in, ventilate, also for you to be able to escape out that window. So that if you're in the room asleep and something happens outside the bedroom door, fire, smoke, heat, whatever, and you can't get out, you can emergency escape, not an egress, but an escape out of that bedroom. This would encourage people, if they're basically, it would potentially prohibit us from enforcing the safety requirements to have that rescue window in that room, because if we say, yo, you got to have it, and they're like, well, I don't want it because it's not really a bedroom, when in fact, in the real world, that's what it's going to be used as. So rather than get into a situation where it creates a conflict between our constituents, yours, mine, the public, if you will, and the government, potentially an adversarial sort of situation where we're going to have to call them or press them on something. I think it works fine without it. And again, I think the conditions or the cases that you're trying to prevent or address are probably not that significant.
All right, if folks have their hands up, I can't quite see it, so.
Yeah, I have a question.
Let me know. Thank you, Ms. Young.
Okay, actually, it's for you, Director Francis. Okay, so where I agree with Ms. Walsh on this bill is really we're charging people an incredible amount of money for a surcharge because they're adding on a garage. That clearly isn't what we were anticipating when we passed this bill. But what we were anticipating was people building additions to their home that would add bedrooms, because the bedroom addition has the potential to add more students to the school district, which was exactly the reason for this school surcharge bill, was to try and capture what we could for the people who were utilizing those services. So how do we do that? Or do we just say there's, as you just said, there's not that much activity like that going on in the county, so we should just not worry with it? Is that, well, and that actually brings me to a secondary question. How much activity like this is going on in the county?
We get additions all the time, and sometimes those additions are for workspace, sitting rooms, recreation rooms. A lot of times they're 4 bedrooms, not 4 bedrooms, but
Right.
4 bedrooms.
FOR bedrooms,
And
yes.
again, they could be 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom additions. It all depends on what they're trying to do. But I thought from in the previous work session, I thought the discussion is that the school facility surcharge was never intended to be applied to additions. And so this is a way to try
I
and
disagreed with
correct
that. My recollection is that we did talk about that and that we did purposefully make that decision, but I have not actually gone back and looked at those discussions from 3.5, almost 4 years ago. So, yeah.
Well,
I
but
can add that much of it was decided between when we were looking at the children who come from resales, who would most likely be the recipients of additions, older Columbia homes, things like that, versus new construction builds. And those were really what we were looking at, was making sure that, because predominantly in the county, we're looking at new construction of new homes, and specifically because we know that most children come out of single-family detached homes, that we wanted to look at those new constructions, specifically of those single-family detached homes. So if it was really more of just an afterthought, but it was not part of the sort of the $200 billion projection, because we were looking at new construction and the square footage of those homes specifically.
Well, and again, it goes back to what the discussion we had at the previous work session was that this language, as well as the excise tax, excise tax was generated to create funds for the roads. The school facilities surcharge was created to create funds for the schools. When you start determining whether it's bedrooms or are they adding kids to the school, it was never intended that way. I mean, it's like we want to create this fee to generate funds for the school, and we're going to apply it to new construction. Now, I think the debate about whether I'm adding to an existing house, and so I'm already here, I'm not really adding to it, that's a valid debate. But again, I think the 2,000 square foot limitation addresses that adequately enough that, again, if you're doing a 2,000 or 2,500 square foot addition to a house, you're kind of exceeding above and beyond. But if you're just adding on to something that you're already here, charge the lower rate. I think that actually addresses it quite adequately.
What if it was 1,000 feet?
What if it was 1,000?
So you could put in 1,000 square feet and then you would get charged above that?
Well, I think Amendment 2 and Amendment 1 to Amendment 2 both address that as to, if it's a small addition up to 2,000 square feet, we'll only charge a $1.32 a square foot rate to it. And anything over 2,000 square feet would be the higher rate.
2,000 square feet, that's a house.
Do a different number. I mean, that's up to you all. I mean, do a different number. My concern, as I mentioned during the last work session, was that we had a 1,000 square foot house that was being gutted, and a 4,000 square foot addition was being tacked onto it. So it's just a matter of what number you want to pick. But if you want to say if it's additions that are small enough, we're going to charge the lower rate, and over that we charge the higher rate. I think that's perfectly, a legitimate way to do it, and a very straightforward way to do it. There's not a whole lot of discussion or interpretation between us, the public. Is it a bedroom? Is it not a bedroom? Is an addition? Is it not addition? It's 2,000 square feet or less. Here's the rate. It's over 2,000 square feet. Here's this other rate. Or 1,000 square feet, or 500, or 3,000, whatever number you decide. But it makes it very straightforward and very clear cut as to. The idea is that if you have an existing house and you're adding on to it, there's going to be a certain break for, a certain size.
Is there a way to exclude outside buildings like a garage from
Detached garages are already exempt.
detached?
And yes, unless they
But-
have occupiable space.
But what if it was attached? Is there a way to permanently exclude the expansion of attached garages? Because somebody could easily, I imagine if they had a lot of land, they could easily expand their garage, to 3,000 square feet, particularly out west, if they have farming equipment that they would want to park inside to be protected from the elements. I could see them maybe wanting to expand a garage, and that would make sense to me, and I don't think that they should be charged that higher rate to do that.
And again, if it was a detached garage, we're not going to charge that anyway.
Right, but I'm talking attached here.
Right.
Is there a way to do that? I mean, do you just have to put the word attached
I'm an engineer,
garage?
there's always a way.
There's always a way, okay.
Vice Chair Rigby,
Ms. Walsh, is that your?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Go ahead.
yeah, so, Mr. Francis, I think, well, yeah, God, I can't see the glasses and not glasses. I put forward the Amendment 1 that dealt with the accessory apartments and two-family dwellings. And public hearing testimony prompted it, but we were immediately reminded of the Carolyn Drive property in D1 where and there was all kinds of contests about conditional use and whether this property owner was creating and then marketing, a duplex essentially that was being described as an in-law suite or just a single family home. Do you know the Carolyn?
Vaguely.
Okay, all right, then I won't even ask you
But
specifically about that.
but again, in that sort of a scenario that you just described, I would think that the planning and zoning folks, you can't just put a second dwelling unit on an existing lot. That you're creating, two dwelling units on a single lot, and that creates some other issues, not just DILP and school facilities surcharge, but also some zoning considerations that would have to be addressed.
Okay, but so if I understood what you said to us, moments ago, was that we don't need my amendment number 1, because as is, those would not be assessed a school impact fee?
Those, if it's, say you had that house and you're adding on to it to create, and there's a question, is it going to be a separate dwelling unit? I'm taking a single-family dwelling and basing it into a duplex. I would think, first off, you'd have to have the zoning approval to make it a duplex, and assuming that were the case, then we would treat that, it's no different than getting when you build a stick of townhouses, you have a permit for this house, you have a permit for that house.
Oh, okay.
So that duplex next door that you'd be adding on to that would be considered a new dwelling, and we'd be charging the $750 a square foot as if it were brand new.
Okay, so I'm backwards. You're saying that would already be assessed?
Correct.
The school impact
Correct.
fees, so therefore the Amendment 1 would not be necessary?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Then, I think, Ms. Rigby, you're amendment number 1 to amendment number 2, and I think this is probably where I, realized I was not able to keep track of what was kind of flying at us at the last legislative session. Can you walk through what the effect of your amendment 1 to amendment number 2 is, please?
Sure. So again, I have homes in my district, and I'm sure that most people here do as well, that are much older. There are some that are about 1,000 square feet, no basement. These are much smaller homes, and the families in them already exist in the way they are. They're not adding any more children, but they have nowhere else to go in the county because we have no other inventory. So essentially, if a resident was putting on an addition and they were doing it at 1,999 square feet, it would be assessed a lower amount. And if they were doing it at 2,005 square feet, then the 1,999 square feet would be assessed at the lower rate, and then 2,000 to 2,005 would be assessed at the higher rate. It's a progressive structure. I know. Shocking
You're
for
talking
me,
about
but-
Amendment 2 and Amendment 2 to Amendment 2, correct?
Yep.
Not Amendment 1.
Am I yeah, you are
my
correct.
I
apologies.
thought Councilman Walsh had asked about Amendment 1 to Amendment 1.
No, well, no, I'm
I think she
asking about
has. I was
amendment
just
number
going off
1
of memory.
to amendment 2, right? Amendment, am I not right?
Okay, Amendment 2, okay.
And I think those are the only two other kind of out there. But I want, right, the effect of your amendment 1 to amendment 2 is that you wouldn't have kind of the square footage version of what Mr. Francis described for reading rooms and bedrooms. Is it that someone who really wanted a 2,005-foot addition would fess up and say, I want 2,005, but I'll pay 132 on the first 2,000 and the higher rate on the last 5, versus cutting off a bathroom or a closet so that you just get under the 2,000
Right.
threshold, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
correct. And, in case you wanted to also convert your carport into a garage, which would then be an attached garage, it wouldn't sort
Still-
of blow that number
Correct.
that you were trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
we
get it.
actually had a conversation about this afterwards, because the original language was it's like up to 2,000, and again, 1999, let's make it 2,000, that's a great number. 2,000 and less is this, and 2,000 and more than 2,000 is that. And so the conversation I had was like, okay, well, if I do a 2,000 square foot addition, it's $1.32 a square foot, right? And he said if it's 2,001 square feet, then the whole 2,001 is charged at the $750. And I had a conversation with our folks in house, and like, yeah, that's how we would read that. And I'm like, I could easily see somebody making the case saying, no, I pay $1.32 for the first 2,000, and then I pay $750 for anything over 2,000. And I'm like, yeah, it's not the way I read that. If that's the way you want it, that's fine. That's a policy decision. I think Amendment 2 and Amendment 2 to Amendment 2 to Amendment 2, Amendment 1 rather to Amendment 2, clarify that it's very clear that the first 2,000 square feet is at the lower rate. And if it's a 1 square foot over that, well, we charge an extra $7.50 for that 1 square foot. So again, it's pretty straightforward. It's not as easy to do, with software and whatnot, but we can make that work. That we can figure that out, and it does make it very clear as to the first 2,000 square foot is at this lower rate.
And just to add, the other thing I think that the other problem we were trying to solve was to prevent sort of successive additions. So, I'm going to do 1,000 square foot addition now, all at the lower rate, and then I'm going to do another, 2,000 square foot addition later, or 1,999 square foot addition, to try and avoid that successive, the loopholing, I guess I would call it.
Would this amendment actually do that? Because I don't know that it would. you come in and do 1,900 this week, and 6 months later, after that project's completed, you come in and apply for another 1,000 square feet, and we'd call it a 1,000 square foot
It
addition.
wouldn't,
Yeah, I don't
but I
think it
think it
would.
would disincentivize the process, right? Because you're going to want to go through the process once versus there's less benefit in going through the process multiple times.
I think
Because the way that Amendment 1 was written is that everything below that would be one fee and everything above it would be another. And so by having it be a progressive, you're spending a little bit more, but that should be worth your time to not go through the entirety of the process again.
The only concern I have with that is, when does an addition become existing square footage? If I have a 2,000 square foot house and I add 1,000 square feet to it, when it's all done and you're completed, as far as we know, it's a 3,000 square foot house. Unless there's some specific language that says, additions that are done within a, 5-year period. So if you come back within 5 years and add another 1,500 square feet, we're going to assume that, whatever over 2,000 cumulative is, again, that's kind of a bureaucratic nightmare as well, to keep
Love
track
that
of that.
suggestion.
Yeah, the same sort of things happen with improvements in the floodplain, for example, is that there are time limits for, progressive changes, because if you exceed 50% of the value of the house, you have to flood-proof at a certain point. And so if you make, 20% improvement and then a 30% improvement and then more within a certain time frame, it all adds up and it's all cumulative. But it does create, a tracking and a paperwork sort of quagmire.
I think it's hard to think that somebody's going to, if they want to do a 2,500 square foot addition, they're going to do 1,900, and then they're going to go through the whole thing again and mobilize contracts, probably going to cost more than that, 600 times $6 that it's going to cost them. And if somebody's really got that much time on their hands, I don't know that we really care how you interpret it, do we? I just think that's going to be such the outlier.
Will you let us know if somebody does that, Director
What's that?
Francis? Will you let us know if somebody does that?
Absolutely.
So we can then legislate it away? But I have to agree with Mr. Youngman. People they're not going to do that. My concern is not that. My concern is 2,000 square feet. That's a house. And to
Well,
say.
and again, that's up to you from a
Right,
policy
I
standpoint.
know.
Pick a number.
That's my concern.
Yeah.
Yeah,
2,000 is as good as anything else.
yeah.
I was the
But
one that was
again,
promoting
you have to
the
consider these
bedroom
older
thing.
homes.
Oh, sorry, Christiana, go ahead.
I think it's inconsiderate of our older homes and people who live in them, and the families that already live there. A lot of times they're not making space for new children. They're making space for their existing children, or their parents who are coming to live with them because of the housing crisis we're in. That's why people are making a lot of these choices on additions. If you look at Columbia homes that were built in the 80s, a lot of those single-family detached homes are about, 3,000 square feet when you add in the basements and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not true of homes that were built in earlier time periods. And so if, we want our residents to stay in the county, to have homes that work for them, that they aren't forced to leave for mobility reasons or other reasons, I think we have to make sure that they have that level of flexibility. And especially when we look at how we, created those formulas for the school surcharge, we're really looking at new construction. And I think it is a policy benefit to incentivize our homeowners to invest in their existing homes, especially in our older neighborhoods. And having it by square footage, if you go from 1,200 square feet to 3,200 square feet, you're not even comparable with a new build home. You're just comparable with a 30, 40-year-old home. So I just think those are really important considerations to take in. There's no new 2,000 square foot house that you can buy anywhere. That doesn't exist. People are trying to make sure that their homes work for them. Are there any other final questions on the surcharge aspect on this bill?
I think Ms. Walsh and I both have comments. And my comment is there's
Sure.
2,000
Do
square
you want to
feet.
go, Ms. Young, and then Ms. Walsh?
There's 2,000 square feet houses all over my neighborhood. And I certainly don't feel badly about saying, okay, you get the first 1,000 at the lower rate. And if you want to build a 2,000 square foot addition, which gives you a 3,000 square foot house, which actually is still highly unusual in all the surrounding neighborhoods where I live in Columbia, a 3,000 square foot house, then you pay the extra price. If you can afford to put a 2,000 square foot addition on your house, you can probably afford the extra surcharge amount on the second 1,000 square feet. That's my view.
If I could just add in there, 2,000 sounds like a lot, and again, I don't really, doesn't matter to me one way or the other, but the way the square footage is measured, again, you could have a 700 square foot footprint. If you have a basement, a first floor, and a second floor, that's 2,100 square feet. So, you're over the 2,000 right at that, and it's only a 700 square foot footprint, which is not, I don't want to say not that big of a deal, but, it's not unreasonable.
You could also look at the percentage of the house. If they were more than doubling the size of the house, I already lost my bedroom argument. I think now we're kind of,
I liked
in
your
the
bedroom.
weeds on
I
this
just
square
want you to
footage.
know, Mr. Yeoman, I
Yeah.
liked your bedroom argument.
I know, but you know what? Bob just made a really good point earlier, which was, as far as the cheating and all that, getting one over on us, the fact that somebody would skip putting an egress window in to get out of paying the surcharge is, that's the thing that would
And that's
scare
not just a
me.
theoretical point. That
huge
was
safety
actually
issue.
a point that was made because health department has some requirements as far as septic, for example, associated with bedrooms. And so people will, it'd be amazing how many sewing rooms we have in this county. So that's, again, you don't want to kind of put people in that kind of an adversarial position between them and their government.
I mean, we could do this as a percentage of the existing house, but I just think we're overcomplicating it. I mean, we could just go 1,500 and compromise, and some people are going to get away with adding bedrooms and putting kids in schools and not paying the higher fee. But I think Liz is right. I don't think it was ever contemplated to count additions, and she's trying to fix that. So I would go 1,000, 2,000, 1,500, whatever everybody else can get happy with.
Ms.
Ms.
Rick-
Walsh?
Oh, okay, thanks. All right, so I think my questions are housekeeping. I think we heard from Mr. Francis that we don't need Amendment 1 as amended or standalone. And so procedurally, I think we did vote on that. I think it did pass as amended. We've done our research. We think the solution there, if we thought we had the votes, we would move to rescind amended Amendment number 1. And that would make that amendment and the bedroom conversation and the redundant accessory, whatever that is, go away. On Amendment number 2, it sounds like there may still be an issue or not. Did that one pass as amended as well, Ms. Harrod, already?
Let me check real quick. Amendment 2, I don't believe Amendment 2 as amended passed. What did pass, a minute.
Amendment 2 passed, but we didn't, that's when we stopped, after the amendment to the amendment.
Correct, Amendment 2.
Sorry, the amendment to the
did
amendment
pass.
passed, and that's when we,
Okay,
No, I'm sorry, correct. Ms. Rigby is correct. Amendment 1 to Amendment 2 passed, and Amendment 2 is where we stopped and tabled it.
okay. All right, so there would be an opportunity here if there was some majority of the council that wished to change that threshold from 2,000 to some other number, to amend Amendment number 2 to make those changes, right? I, as bill sponsor, like Mr. Francis said, I think it's an arbitrary number. That's where it is. There is, though, a third amendment, which we did not reach, which is this notion of retroactivity. I think, Mr. Francis, you told us, either at work session or public hearing, that until we got to the January 2022 date when the 750 figure cut on, that we were doing our very best to get applicants in under much lower rates, that there weren't a lot of people charged the incremental step
Correct.
up. So my concern with intentionally putting that retroactivity in was it seemed real unfair to me that there would be this body of property owners who would have paid that 750 as we're discussing, even as we're, hopefully no one, was assessed that as the bill was pending, but there's some body of persons that would have paid 10 months worth of fees that had they just waited another month wouldn't because of this. And so, from the administration standpoint, and they're the sponsor of this amendment, it seems like them giving a check back to X number of homeowners, that makes lots of people real happy, I would think. But that was my thinking. It wasn't an accident. It was very intentional. We didn't want this to be unfairly applied or not applied to a body of homeowners who had no idea that this was an issue, because we didn't know it was an issue until it was raised by some of our own constituents. So I would hope that we would get a majority vote in not supporting, I guess. I would hope Amendment 3 either isn't moved or fails, because I would like to take care of those people who paid the higher rate until we get this fix in place. But that's all I had. Vice Chair Rigby.
My questions are really just around that, how it would functionally work. What is the process to return the funds? How do you go through, essentially, and that's really a finance question, I think, because they would be the ones tasked with going through all the records and doing the refund process.
No, well, they're actually only at the tail end of that process. It would primarily be us. I don't know how many there are, but it is
Well,
a
the good news
finite.
is you can answer it.
Yeah, well, it's a finite number. We'd have to go back and look at all of the permits that were issued, additions that were issued from January 1st on, and determine how much square footage there were. If it was more than and again, if we keep the amendments as they are now, if it was more than 2,000 square feet, basically they'd be getting a refund of $6.18 per square foot for the first 2,000. So if it was an addition over 2,000, they'd be getting a refund check for $12,360. And if it was some addition smaller than that, then we'd have to calculate it at the reduced rate. But we would have to be the ones to go through permit by permit, looking at the square footage, looking what was included as the addition, and then making the calculations, and then processing the paperwork, and then we send it to finance. Quite frankly, their part's the easy part.
I'm sorry, Director Francis.